The wagon wheels hadn't even stopped turning when the whispers began. Dust curled through the air of the small frontier town, clinging to skin, to clothes, to dignity. A crowd had already gathered, men in worn boots and sun-beaten hats, their eyes sharp with expectation as they waited for the mail-order brides to step down one by one. She stood inside the wagon, fingers trembling against the rough wooden edge, her heart pounding so loudly she was certain everyone could hear it. This was it. The moment everything was supposed to change. Behind her, another girl adjusted her bright dress and smiled nervously. In front of her, one had already stepped down and was immediately greeted, chosen within seconds by a man who barely looked twice before claiming her. Laughter followed. Approval. Movement. But when her turn came, the air shifted. She stepped down slowly, her boots touching the dry earth, her worn dress brushing against her ankles. It wasn't new like the others. It wasn't bright. It had been mended more than once, the seams telling quiet stories of struggle. Her hands instinctively moved to smooth it, as if that could somehow fix what the men would see. For a moment, no one spoke. Then one man stepped forward. He circled her, not unkindly, but not kindly either. His eyes moved over her like he was inspecting a horse at auction. He frowned slightly. "Too thin," he muttered, just loud enough. Another man chuckled behind him. "Does she even speak?" someone else added. Heat rushed to her cheeks. She opened her mouth, wanting to say something, anything, but the words caught in her throat like thorns. Her voice had never been loud. Not in a world where louder people decided your worth before you could prove it. "I need someone strong," the first man said, already stepping back. "Someone who can handle work." "I need someone with spirit," another added dismissively. "Not this." A ripple of laughter passed through the crowd. Each word landed heavier than the last. Not shouted. Not cruel in tone. But final. Decided. She stood there, frozen, as if her feet had sunk into the dirt beneath her. Around her, the other brides were being chosen, led away, their futures decided in moments. Smiles. Agreements. Hands being taken. But no one stepped toward her again. Not one. A man near the edge shook his head. "Not worth the journey," he said plainly. And just like that, it was over. Her name, spoken only minutes ago with expectation, was now forgotten. Crossed off without ceremony. She lowered her gaze, staring at the ground so no one would see the tears threatening to rise. She wouldn't cry here. Not in front of them. Not where their laughter still lingered in the air like smoke. Slowly, she turned. Each step away from the crowd felt heavier than the last. The sound of voices behind her faded, replaced by a hollow silence that pressed against her chest. She had nowhere to go. No family waiting. No home to return to. This had been her chance. And it had slipped through her fingers before she even had the chance to hold it. Her hands curled into fists at her sides as she walked, trying to keep herself steady. If she just kept moving, maybe the pain wouldn't catch up to her. Maybe she could outrun the shame burning in her chest. A few more steps, and she would be out of sight. Out of their judgment. Out of their world. "Don't go." The voice was low. Deep. So quiet it almost disappeared into the wind, but it reached her. Her steps faltered. For a moment, she thought she had imagined it. Just her mind, desperate to hold on to something that wasn't there. Then it came again. Closer this time. "Don't go. Be mine." Her breath caught. Slowly, she turned. The crowd had gone silent. Every head shifted in the same direction, not toward her, but toward the man standing just beyond the edge of the gathering. A man who hadn't spoken before. A man who hadn't stepped forward. A man who didn't belong to the laughter. He stood apart from them all. Tall. Still. Watching. The space around him felt different, like even the dust knew not to cross too close. And somehow, impossibly, he was looking only at her. Not at her dress. Not at her weakness. Her. The world seemed to hold its breath. And for the first time since she stepped off that wagon, someone had chosen her. For several seconds, she couldn't move. The entire town watched her. The same people who had laughed moments before now stood silent, their expressions changing from amusement to disbelief. No one expected those words to come from him. Be mine. 2 simple words. Yet they carried more weight than all the cruel ones she had heard that morning. Her eyes remained fixed on the man standing at the edge of the crowd. He was unlike anyone she had ever seen. The Apache warrior stood beneath the burning afternoon sun, his long black hair moving slightly with the desert wind. His powerful frame was uncovered except for tribal jewelry and the simple pieces of his warrior clothing. Every person in town knew his name, but few knew the man behind the rumors. They called him dangerous. They called him wild. They whispered stories whenever he passed through town. But she noticed something different. He wasn't looking at her like the others had. There was no judgment in his eyes. No disappointment. No calculation. Only calm. The same calm that had somehow made the whole town fall silent. One of the men who had rejected her earlier let out a mocking laugh. You cannot be serious. The Apache warrior slowly turned his gaze toward him. The laughter disappeared. The man swallowed and suddenly found the ground much more interesting than the conversation. Another man stepped forward, shaking his head. You're telling me you want her? The question sounded almost like an insult. The Apache didn't answer immediately. He simply looked back at her. And somehow, that silence spoke louder than any argument. She lowered her eyes. You don't know me, she whispered. Her voice was soft, almost lost in the wind. The Apache took one step closer. No, he said. His voice was deep but gentle. I know enough. She looked up, confused. Enough? How could anyone know enough about her after only a few moments? He continued. I saw them look at what you had. His eyes moved briefly toward the crowd. Your dress. Your hands. Your silence. Then his gaze returned to hers. But I saw something they did not. Her heart tightened. What? The Apache studied her for a moment. Strength. The word surprised her. Strength. No one had ever used that word for her. Weak. Poor. Unwanted. Those were the words she knew. But strength? She almost didn't believe she heard him correctly. A few people in the crowd began whispering again. He's making a mistake. She won't survive out there. She doesn't belong with him. Every whisper reminded her of the same thing. Everyone had already decided what she was worth. But this man was the first person who didn't seem interested in deciding her worth at all. He simply saw it. Still, fear remained. She had spent her entire life learning that promises could disappear. People could leave. Kind words could turn cruel. She looked at him carefully. Why me? The Apache warrior didn't answer right away. For the first time, she noticed something beneath his strong appearance. A loneliness. A quiet sadness hidden behind years of being feared. Because you were the only one who stood alone and still refused to break, he finally said. The word struck deeper than she expected. She remembered standing there while men judged her. She remembered wanting to run. Wanting to disappear. But she had stayed. Somehow, she had stayed. The Apache extended his hand. Not grabbing. Not demanding. Simply offering. A choice. The gesture confused her more than anything else. Everyone else today had treated her like something to be selected. Something to be owned. But this man was giving her the one thing no one else had. A choice. "You don't have to come with me," he said quietly. The crowd reacted with surprise. Even she looked shocked. "You're not forcing me?" The Apache shook his head. "No." His answer was immediate. "Never." That single word changed something inside her. Because for the first time in a very long time, she felt like a person again. Not a burden. Not a disappointment. Not a bride nobody wanted. A person. She looked around at the town one final time. The place where she had arrived carrying hope. The place where that hope had been crushed. Then she looked back at the warrior standing before her. A man everyone feared. But the only man who had shown her kindness. Slowly, she reached forward. Her hand moved toward his. The crowd held its breath. When her fingers touched his palm, the Apache warrior lowered his head slightly, not in victory, but in respect. And she realized something that frightened her almost as much as it comforted her. The man who everyone called a savage was the first person who had ever treated her like she mattered. But as she stepped away from the town beside him, she had no idea that the journey ahead would reveal secrets about his past. And about why he had been waiting all these years for someone exactly like her. The journey away from the town was quieter than she expected. She had imagined fear. She had imagined regret. She had imagined herself looking back at the road, wondering if she had made the biggest mistake of her life. But as the hours passed, something strange happened. She felt peace. The Apache warrior rode ahead, guiding the way through the open land. He never rushed her. When the road became difficult, he slowed his horse. When the sun grew too hot, he stopped beneath the shade of the trees and waited until she was ready to continue. It confused her. Everything she had heard about men like him told her to expect cruelty. She expected commands. She expected anger. She expected to be reminded every day that she had been rejected by others and accepted only by him. But he never mentioned it. Not once. As the sun began to disappear behind the mountains, they reached his home. She stopped and stared. She had expected a harsh place, a simple shelter hidden away from everyone. Instead, she saw a small but carefully built home surrounded by nature. There was a garden near the entrance, stacks of firewood arranged neatly, and signs of a life built with patience. It wasn't a place of loneliness. It was a place of peace. The Apache noticed her expression. "You expected something different," he said. She looked away quickly. "I suppose I did." A small smile touched his face. "Most people do." Those words stayed with her. Most people did. Because everyone had already created a story about him without ever knowing him. Just like they had created a story about her. Inside the home, she noticed more surprises. There were blankets folded neatly, food prepared, and even a small wooden chair near the window where the morning light entered. He had prepared a place for someone. But she wondered who. "You were expecting someone?" she asked quietly. The Apache paused. For a moment, she thought she had asked something she shouldn't. Then he answered. "I was hoping." The simple reply caught her attention. Hoping for what? He looked toward the fire. For a person who would see this place as more than just a hiding place. She didn't know what to say. Because she understood that feeling. Being judged before anyone knew your heart. Being rejected before anyone heard your story. That night, he prepared food and placed the larger portion in front of her. She pushed the plate back slightly. "You should eat." "I will." "You gave me more." "Yes." "Why?" He looked genuinely confused by the question. "Because you need it." The answer was so simple that it almost hurt. No one had worried about what she needed in a long time. People had only cared about what she could provide. Could she cook? Could she work? Could she serve? Could she become the perfect wife they imagined? Nobody had asked if she was tired. Nobody had asked if she was afraid. Nobody had asked if she was okay. Until now. Later that evening, she sat near the fire while he repaired a piece of leather equipment. The silence between them wasn't uncomfortable. It was different. Safe. "You don't talk much," she finally said. The Apache glanced up. "No." A small smile appeared on her face. "That is the shortest answer anyone has ever given me." For the first time, she saw a real smile from him. A small one. Almost hidden. But real. "I speak when words matter," he replied. She looked into the flames. "And what matters?" He was quiet for a moment. Then he answered. "Truth." The word settled between them. She wanted to tell him everything. About the years of feeling unwanted. About the people who made her believe she wasn't enough. About how painful it was to stand in front of strangers and be rejected like an object. But fear still held her back. She had learned that showing weakness gave people power over her. The Apache seemed to notice her hesitation. "You don't have to tell me anything tonight." She looked at him. "You don't want to know?" "I do." His answer surprised her. "But I will not take what you are not ready to give." Her eyes lowered. Those words were unfamiliar. Respect. Patience. Kindness. Things she had almost forgotten existed. Days passed. Slowly, the walls around her heart began to fall. She discovered that the man everyone feared was gentle with animals, careful with his words, and protective without being controlling. She discovered that his silence was not emptiness. It was wisdom. And she discovered something even more surprising. She was beginning to feel like she belonged. But one question remained in her mind. Why had he chosen her? Why, among all the women who had arrived that day, had he walked forward for the one everyone else rejected? She knew the answer would change everything. And soon, the Apache warrior would finally reveal the reason. The days that followed were unlike anything she had ever known. For the first time in years, she woke up without fear. There was no shouting. No one telling her she wasn't enough. No one measuring her value by what she could do for them. The Apache warrior never demanded anything from her. Instead, he taught her. He showed her how to recognize the changing winds, how to find the safest paths through the land, and how to understand the quiet language of nature. He never laughed when she made mistakes. He never grew impatient when she struggled. "You learn quickly," he told her one morning as she successfully started a small fire. She smiled faintly. "No one has ever said that to me." The Apache looked at her carefully. Then they were not paying attention. Those words stayed with her. Because that was the truth. People had looked at her entire life, but very few had truly seen her. They saw her worn dress. They saw her quiet voice. They saw everything they believed was wrong. But this man saw something different. He saw her heart. One evening, as the sun painted the sky with orange and gold, she sat outside the home while the Apache repaired a broken tool nearby. The silence between them felt comfortable now. Not empty. Comfortable. But there was still one question she carried inside. A question that had grown stronger every day. Finally, she gathered enough courage to ask. "Why did you choose me?" The Apache's hand stopped. For a long moment, he didn't answer. She wondered if she had crossed a line. But then he placed the tool down and looked toward the distant mountains. "Because I knew what it felt like." She frowned slightly. "What?" "To be judged before anyone knows your story." His voice was quiet. She watched him carefully. For the first time, she saw the pain behind his strength. The warrior everyone feared had his own wounds. "My people have been called many things," he continued. "Dangerous. Wild. Less than human. He looked back at her. People decided who I was before they ever spoke to me. Her heart tightened. Because his words sounded painfully familiar. I saw the way they looked at you in that town, he said. The same way they looked at me. She lowered her eyes. They thought I was worthless. No, he replied. His voice was firm. They were wrong. The simple certainty in his voice almost broke her. Because a part of her still believed those people. A part of her still wondered if maybe she truly wasn't worth choosing. The Apache moved closer, but he stopped at a respectful distance. I did not choose you because no one else wanted you. She looked up. I chose you because they failed to see what was standing in front of them. Her eyes filled with emotion. Nobody had ever said something like that to her. The Apache continued. When you stood there after every man rejected you, you could have begged. She remembered that moment. The humiliation. The pain. The desire to disappear. But you didn't. His voice softened. You walked away with your head still raised. She swallowed hard. I was trying not to cry. A small smile appeared on his face. Strength is not the absence of pain. He looked into her eyes. Strength is continuing while carrying it. The words reached a place inside her that had been wounded for years. For so long, she thought surviving was something anyone could do. She never realized it was proof of courage. That night, she finally told him her story. She spoke about the home she lost. The people who abandoned her. The years of believing she had to earn kindness. The loneliness that followed her everywhere. The Apache listened. He didn't interrupt. He didn't judge. When she finished, the fire had burned low. I am sorry, he said. She shook her head. I don't want pity. I do not pity you. His answer was immediate. I respect you. Those words meant more than sympathy ever could. Because pity looked down. Respect stood beside someone. And that was what he was offering. A partnership. Not a rescue. Not ownership. A place beside him. As the night grew darker, she realized something that frightened her. She was no longer afraid of him. The man she had been warned about was the only person who had made her feel safe. But just as she began opening her heart, a shadow from the past was moving closer. The people who rejected her were not ready to accept that she had found a home. And they were coming to take back what they believed they had thrown away. The morning arrived with an uneasy silence. The Apache warrior noticed it before she did. The birds were quieter. The wind carried unfamiliar sounds. And the horses in the distance had already sensed strangers approaching. She stepped outside, looking toward the horizon. At first, she saw only dust. Then came the riders. Her heart tightened. She recognized some of them immediately. The same men from the town. The same men who had looked her over like she was something to be purchased. The same men who had turned away when she needed kindness the most. The Apache stepped forward. His expression changed, not with fear, but with awareness. They came for me? She asked softly. He shook his head. No. His eyes remained fixed on the approaching riders. They came because they believe they still have a claim over you. Her stomach dropped. A claim. Even after everything. Even after they had rejected her. The riders stopped near the home, and the man who had rejected her first climbed down from his horse. His face carried the same arrogance she remembered. There you are, he said. She stared at him. There was no warmth in his voice. No apology. No regret. Only possession. You left with him, the man continued. That was not what was supposed to happen. She almost couldn't believe what she was hearing. Not what was supposed to happen. She remembered standing alone in the middle of town. She remembered every person turning away. She remembered being treated as if she had no value. "You refused me," she said quietly. The man shifted uncomfortably. "That was different." "How?" Her voice surprised even herself. "Stronger." The man opened his mouth, but no answer came. Because there was none. The Apache remained silent beside her. He didn't need to speak. He trusted her to speak for herself. That was something she had never experienced before. The man looked toward the warrior. "You think she belongs with you?" The Apache's eyes narrowed slightly. "She belongs to herself." The response shocked everyone. Even her. Because that was the difference. The town had argued over who would take her. The Apache was the only one who reminded everyone that she had a choice. The men laughed nervously. "You expect us to believe that?" The Apache didn't move. "I expect nothing from you." The tension grew. But before the situation could become worse, she stepped forward. The Apache glanced at her, but he didn't stop her. For the first time in her life, she wasn't waiting for someone else to defend her. She was defending herself. "You came here because you think I was unwanted property," she said. The men looked surprised. "But you are wrong." Her voice shook slightly, but she continued. "I was rejected by every person who had the chance to choose me." The words hung in the air. She looked at the man who had called her not worth the journey. "You saw my clothes." She looked at another. "You saw my silence." Then she looked at all of them. "But none of you saw me." The wind moved around them. No one spoke. She turned slightly toward the Apache. He was the first person who did. The Apache's expression softened. She continued. "He did not choose me because I was perfect." Her voice grew stronger. "He chose me because I was a person." The men exchanged uneasy looks. They had expected a frightened woman. They had expected someone who would hide behind the Apache. They had not expected this. The first man shook his head. "You're making a mistake." She looked at him calmly. "No." A small smile appeared. "For the first time, I am making my own choice." The words were simple. But they carried the power of someone who had finally found her voice. The Apache looked at her with quiet pride. Not because she had chosen him. But because she had finally chosen herself. The men slowly turned away. They had arrived believing they could take back what they once rejected. Instead, they discovered something they never expected. A woman they thought was weak had become stronger than their judgment. As they disappeared into the distance, she stood beside the Apache beneath the open sky. But one final question remained between them. After everything, would she stay because she needed him? Or would she stay because her heart had truly chosen him? The dust from the riders slowly disappeared into the distance. For a long time, neither of them spoke. The land returned to silence, but it was a different kind of silence now. Not the silence of rejection. Not the silence of loneliness. A peaceful silence. She stood beside the Apache warrior, watching the horizon where the men had vanished. A strange feeling filled her chest. For years, she had believed her life was controlled by other people's decisions. Someone decided she was not beautiful enough. Someone decided she was not strong enough. Someone decided she was not worth choosing. But today, for the first time, she had made a decision that belonged only to her. And that decision had changed everything. The Apache looked at her carefully. "You should not have had to face them alone." She turned toward him. "But I wasn't alone." His expression softened. "You stood for yourself." She nodded. "Yes." A small smile appeared. "And you let me." The Apache looked away for a moment. "I promised I would never take your choice from you." Those words meant more than he could know. Because that was what made him different. He had the strength to protect her. But he also had the wisdom to respect her. That night, they sat beside the fire beneath a sky full of stars. The flames moved gently between them as the sounds of the wilderness surrounded them. She looked into the fire. When I arrived in that town, I thought my life was over. The Apache listened quietly. I thought being rejected meant I had no value. She paused. But I was wrong. The Apache looked at her. How? She smiled softly. Because being rejected by the wrong people can lead you to the right place. For a moment, the warrior said nothing. But she noticed something in his eyes. Emotion. A man who had faced danger without fear was moved by a simple truth. You gave me a home, she whispered. The Apache shook his head. No. She looked surprised. I gave you a place to stay. His voice became softer. You created the home. Her eyes filled with tears. Because she finally understood. Home was never just walls. It was never just a roof. Home was the feeling of being accepted. The feeling of being seen. The feeling that you did not have to prove you deserved to exist. The days passed, and life slowly changed. The woman who arrived afraid began to laugh again. She planted flowers near the home. She learned the land. She shared stories by the fire. And little by little, the quiet Apache warrior who had spent years alone began to open his heart too. The town had always believed he was incapable of love. They were wrong. He simply had been waiting for someone who understood him. One evening, as the sun set behind the mountains, he stood beside her outside their home. I need to ask you something. She smiled. What? He looked almost uncertain. A powerful warrior feared by many suddenly seemed nervous. Do you stay because you have nowhere else to go? Her smile faded slightly. She understood the question. He wasn't asking because he doubted her. He was asking because he wanted her freedom. She stepped closer. No. The Apache watched her. I stay because I choose to. The words settled between them. Simple. Honest. Powerful. She reached for his hand. I came here because everyone else rejected me. She looked into his eyes. But I remained because you respected me. For the first time, the Apache warrior smiled without hiding it. Not the small smile she had seen before. A real one. The smile of a man who had finally found peace. Years later, people would still tell stories about the woman who arrived as the rejected mail-order bride. But they would tell the story differently. They would not say she was the woman nobody wanted. They would say she was the woman who found the one person who truly saw her. And they would remember the Apache warrior who stood apart from the crowd and whispered words that changed two lives forever. Be mine. Not as a command. Not as ownership. But as a promise. A promise of respect. A promise of loyalty. A promise that after a lifetime of being overlooked, she had finally been chosen.